The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council stretched high above, its walls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that reflected the mood of 1,000 different species. Today, those patterns glowed with condescension and barely contained mockery. Ambassador Li Huiyanwu adjusted his simple black suit and stepped forward to the human podium. Around him, the circular chamber buzzed with alien voices speaking in dozens of languages, all united in their disdain for the small delegation of humans who dared to address them today. The human section was pathetically small compared to the towering platforms of other species. The Vorthok military occupied an entire wing, their reptilian forms gleaming in ceremonial armor that had conquered half the galaxy. The insectoid Kithari hung from the ceiling like living chandeliers, their compound eyes reflecting thousands of tiny images of human weakness. Even the gaseous Nefarians, who existed as shifting clouds of colored mist, seemed to pulse with amusement at humanity's presence. General Krax, supreme commander of the Vorthok forces, rose from his platform, like a mountain of scales and muscle. His voice boomed through the chamber's acoustic systems, designed to carry the words of species far more important than humans. 50 rotations, he began, his forked tongue tasting the air for weakness. 50 rotations, these mammals have occupied our outer rim worlds. And what have they contributed to our great civilization? He paused dramatically, letting his yellow eyes sweep across the assembly. Grain shipments, agricultural reports, maintenance work that our own juveniles could perform. A wave of chittering. Laughter erupted from the Shithri delegation. Their translator boxes converted their clicking sounds into mocking words. The softskins think they deserve seats at the table of predators. Ambassador Park Min-ho, standing beside Lee, felt his jaw tighten. For 2 decades, he had endured these sessions, watching his people dismissed as evolutionary leftovers. His diplomatic training kept his face neutral, but his hands clenched slightly at his sides. And now, Krax continued, his voice rising. To a roar, these creatures dare request voting rights. They want to influence decisions that affect species with millennia of cosmic conquest behind them. The ethereal collective, beings of pure energy who rarely showed emotion, actually shimmered with what could only be described as cosmic laughter. Their spokesperson's voice echoed like wind through stellar formations. We have observed there homeworld's destruction records, natural disasters, solar flares. They could not even protect their own planet from their own star. Lee closed his eyes briefly, remembering the carefully constructed story humanity had told when they first arrived. The natural disaster that had forced them to flee Earth, the refugees seeking shelter. It had been so easy to make the galaxy believe they were helpless survivors. Honored Council Park stepped forward, his voice carrying the practiced tone of diplomatic patience. We represent 200 million human beings across 47 worlds. Our people have served faithfully, meeting every quota, exceeding every agricultural target set for us. Served faithfully? Krax's laugh sounded like metal being scraped against stone. You speak as if you had a choice. You exist because we allow it. Your species survives on our charity. The chamber erupted in approving roars, clicks, and harmonic resonances from dozens of alien throats. Chairman Vexstar, a mechanical being whose body was a fusion of organic tissue and advanced cybernetics, raised all 4 of his arms for silence. The Vorthok general speaks truth, Vexstar announced. Doc. His artificial voice, carrying perfect pronunciation in 17 languages simultaneously. Humans possess no natural weapons, no telepathic abilities, no energy manipulation. Your physical forms are fragile, your lifespans brief, your technology primitive. Lee stood slowly, feeling the weight of every alien gaze upon him. In the gallery above, he could see human observers from various colonies watching the proceedings. Agricultural workers, maintenance technicians, supply coordinators, all wearing the same expression of quiet endurance they had perfected over 5 decades. General Krax, Lee said, his voice barely above a whisper, yet somehow carrying clearly through the vast chamber. We have told you this before, and we will tell you again. Never make us angry. The silence lasted exactly 2.7 seconds. Park had timed these moments before. Then the laughter began. not just from the Vorthok, but from every delegation present. The crystalline walls themselves seemed to vibrate with the sound of cosmic amusement. Cracks wiped away what might have been a tear from his scaled cheek. If reptilian warriors could produce tears of laughter, angry? Oh, this is precious. And what exactly will you do when you become angry? Will you withhold our grain shipments? Perhaps organize a strongly worded farming boycott? More laughter. Even some of the usually neutral species were joining in now. The aquatic collective's representative actually expelled bubbles of mirth from its breathing apparatus. Lee and Park exchanged a look. To the watching galaxy, it appeared to be the helpless glance between two defeated diplomats. But something passed between them, in that moment, a silent communication that had been rehearsed in scenarios they all hoped would never come to pass. The human delegation will return to their assigned agricultural sectors, Chairman Vextar declared, his mechanical arms making dismissive gestures. This council session is concluded. Perhaps next rotation they will bring us something useful, instead of delusional requests for representation. As the humans gathered their minimal documentation and prepared to leave, Lee paused at the great archway that led from the chamber. Behind him, aliens were already chattering about other business, having dismissed humanity from their thoughts. As easily as swatting away an insect, gentle cracks, Lee called out, his voice somehow carrying across the vast space despite the rising alien chatter. The reptilian general looked up from his tactical displays, clearly annoyed at being interrupted. During his victory celebration, "Remember what we said," Lee continued, his dark eyes locking with Crax's yellow ones across the distance. "Never make us angry." For exactly 3 seconds, the chamber fell silent again. Not because the words were threatening, they sounded almost pathetic, coming from such an obviously inferior species. The silence came from the complete absurdity of the situation. Then the laughter exploded again, twice as loud as before. Crax himself led the chorus, his reptilian roar of amusement echoing off the crystal dome. What none of them noticed was Park Minho's hand, which had briefly touched the underside of their assigned seating platform before they departed. Yet, the small device he left behind was no larger than a grain of rice appropriate. Given humanity's supposed agricultural limitations, the device began transmitting immediately, its signal bouncing off communications satellites that the galaxy had permitted humans to launch for farming coordination purposes. The message traveled at light speed toward 47 worlds where humans tended crops, maintained machinery, and kept the galaxy's infrastructure running with quiet efficiency. On New Jeju, an agricultural world 12 parsecs from the council, Chambers, farmer Kim Tai-han, was inspecting his grain silos when his communication device chimed. He read the message twice, then walked slowly toward his equipment barn. The barn looked exactly like what it was supposed to be: storage for farming, machinery, fertilizer supplies, and seasonal equipment. Kim had maintained this appearance for 23 years, even winning efficiency awards from the Vorthok agricultural inspectors. He pressed his hand against what appeared to be a simple tool cabinet. The biometric scanner recognized his prints and retinal pattern. The false wall slid away silently. Behind the farming equipment lay weapons that could have conquered star systems. Pulse rifles that could punch through Vorthok battle armor. Explosives designed to disable alien shield generators. Communication gear that could coordinate simultaneous strikes across multiple galaxies. Kim smiled grimly as he began his preparations. Around him, storage containers marked as fertilizer and seed supplies opened to reveal military equipment that had been smuggled piece by piece. Over 5 decades of careful planning, on 46 other worlds, similar scenes were beginning to play out. The 50-year harvest was about to begin. The galaxy was about to learn why humanity had spent half a century telling them. It's the same simple warning: never make us angry. The joke, it seemed, had been on them all along. The morning sun had just begun to rise over New Busan when the first plasma bombs fell from the sky. 8-year-old Swamenjum was feeding chickens in his family's backyard when the horizon exploded into brilliant orange fire. The ground shook so violently that he fell to his knees, watching in terror as mushroom clouds bloomed where his school used to be. Above the colony, 12 Vorthok dreadnoughts hung in the atmosphere like enormous metal dragons. Their weapon ports glowed with deadly energy as they systematically destroyed every building, every farm, every trace of human life below. On the bridge of the flagship Bone Crusher, General Krax stood with his clawed hands clasped behind his back, watching the destruction through the main viewport. His yellow eyes reflected the fires burning on the planet's surface as his weapons officer reported the progress. Sector 7 eliminated, General. Casualty estimates at 800,000 and rising. Excellent, Krax rumbled. Make sure the recording devices capture every moment. I want every species in the galaxy to see what happens when inferior beings forget their place. The bridge crew, all elite Vorthok warriors, worked with mechanical precision. They had done this before 24 of rebellious worlds. But this felt different somehow. These weren't armed insurgents or military targets. These were families, farmers. Children? Lieutenant Voss, the youngest officer on the bridge, hesitated. As he prepared to target the colony's main hospital, "Sir, the medical facility shows massive civilian gatherings. Thousands of wounded seeking treatment." Krax's reptilian features twisted into what might have been a smile. "Perfect. Them all. Let the galaxy see that mercy is weakness." 800,000 human souls vanished in 37 minutes. The second wave of ships moved to New Sol exactly 1 hour later. "Were Captain Park so young?" A retired teacher who had been tending her garden when the ships appeared sent a final message to her daughter on distant Earth before the plasma fire consumed her. "Tell them we were not afraid. Tell them we died as humans." New Sol's 1 million residents had 1 hour and 14 minutes to say goodbye to everything they had ever known.
Ow.
Some tried to flee in transport ships. The Vorthok vessels picked them off like hunting game, laughing as the escape pods exploded in space. New Jeju fell next. This colony had been humanity's agricultural center, feeding 17 other worlds with their innovative farming techniques. The Vorthok bombarded the grain silos first, creating massive explosions that could be seen from orbit. Then they methodically destroyed every farm, every house, every memorial garden where human families had buried their ancestors. The total death count reached 2.3 million in less than 6 hours. General Krax ordered the footage transmitted across every galactic communication network. The message was simple and brutal. This is what happens when you forget your place in the cosmic order, on hundreds of worlds. Alien species watched the destruction with varying emotions. Some felt satisfaction seeing the uppity humans put in their place. Others experienced an uncomfortable stirring that might have been guilt. A few species actually felt something approaching horror, but none of them spoke against it. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 18 hours after the last human colony burned. The Great Crystal Chamber buzzed with nervous energy as species representatives filed in, all eager to see how the surviving humans would respond to their lesson in reality. Ambassador Li Haiyan-Wu entered the chamber with the same measured steps he had used for 50 years. But everything else about him had changed. His usual diplomatic robes were replaced by a simple black suit that seemed to absorb light. His face, normally carefully neutral, now carried an expression that made even the largest predator species uncomfortable. Behind him, Ambassador Park Min-ho walked with the same transformed presence. The polite, patient diplomat was gone. In his place stood something that made the chamber's air feel suddenly thin and dangerous. "Honored Council," Li began, his voice cutting through the alien chatter like a blade through silk. "We come before you today to discuss the murder of 2.3 million innocent human beings." Chairman Vexstar's mechanical voice carried a note of condescension. The Vorthok military conducted a legitimate police action against rebellious colonial elements. The casualties? WERE. Regrettable, but necessary. Li's dark eyes swept across the assembly, and wherever his gaze fell, alien representatives found themselves looking away. Regrettable. 2.3 million men, women, and children. Regrettable. You should have known their place, General. Krax's voice boomed from the holoscreen, where he appeared from his flagship, still in orbit around the burned remains of New Busan. Perhaps now, The remaining human settlements will show proper respect. Something happened to Lee's face then. For 50 years, the galaxy had seen him smile diplomatically, frown with mild concern, or maintain carefully neutral expressions. They had never seen him smile the way he smiled now. It was the expression of a predator that had finally decided to hunt. General Craxley said softly, "You have 72 hours to surrender yourself and your commanding officers for war." Crimes Tribunal. The chamber erupted in shocked chatter. Several species representatives actually laughed out loud at the absurdity of the demand. Chairman Vextar's artificial voice crackled with electronic amusement. "Or what, human? Will you file another diplomatic protest? Perhaps organize a memorial service?" Park Minho stepped forward then, and for the first time in 5 decades. The galaxy saw what had always been hidden beneath human politeness. His voice carried the weight of barely controlled rage that could crack planets. "Or you will discover why we spent 50 years telling you never to make us angry." Crax's image on the holoscreen actually threw his head back and roared with laughter. "Threats from a species that couldn't protect their own colonies? I command 10,000 warships, human. My fleet could glass every world you've ever touched. What exactly do you have that could threaten me?" Lee's smile widened, and the temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. "General, in 71 hours and 57 minutes, you are going to find out." The transmission cut abruptly, leaving Crax's surprised face frozen on the screen for several seconds before it went dark. The chamber descended into chaos. Species representatives shouted over each other, some calling for immediate human extermination, others demanding deportation to the galactic rim. A few voices, mostly from smaller, peaceful species, suggested investigating the war crimes allegations. But none of them noticed that every human in the chamber had the same expression now. The mask of diplomatic patience had finally fallen away, revealing something underneath that the galaxy had never seen before. And none of them noticed that across the galaxy, every human facility had gone completely silent. On the agricultural world Harvest 7, Farmer Choi Sunjo stood in his equipment barn, staring at the uniform he hadn't worn in 50 years. The black fabric was identical to what Lee and Park had worn to the council session. Around him, 10,000 other farmers were opening similar packages. The uniforms bore no insignia that any alien species would recognize, but they represented something the galaxy was about to learn had never really gone away. On Mining Station Capanine Maintenance Supervisor Yoon, Jihai descended into the lower levels where she had spent 20 years building something the Vorthok. Inspectors had never bothered to investigate properly. The mineral processors hummed above her, but below them lay enough military hardware to outfit a battle fleet. In the depths of space, seemingly ancient human cargo vessels received coded transmissions and began a transformation that would have been impossible if anyone had been watching. External hull plating shifted and fell away like old skin, revealing sleek warships that had been hiding in plain sight for decades. The cargo holds that had carried grain and farming equipment for 50 years opened to reveal fighter bays, weapon systems, and technology that had been carefully reverse-engineered from every alien species that had ever dismissed humans as primitive captain. Lim Hyojin stood on the bridge of what had been registered as the cargo hauler, Peaceful Harvest. Sleek warship Soul's Revenge hummed with power that could split asteroids. Around her, a crew that had spent decades pretending to be simple cargo handlers worked with the precision of elite naval officers. "All stations report ready, Captain," her tactical officer announced. "We have 47 sister ships coming online across the sector." Lim nodded grimly, signaled the fleet. "Operation Reckoning begins in 71 hours and 56 minutes. The galaxy had 72 hours to prepare for war against an enemy they had never bothered to understand. It would not be enough time. Not even close. The first sign something was wrong came at 0300 hours. Galactic Standard Time. Admiral Vakthada of the Vorthok 7th Fleet was reviewing patrol reports when her communications officer suddenly looked up from his station with confusion written across his reptilian features. "Admiral, we've lost contact with the entire outer perimeter. All 63 patrol ships just stopped responding." Vakthura's yellow eyes narrowed. "Equipment malfunction." "Negative, ma'am. Their transponder signals are still active, but they're not moving. No responses to any communications." Before she could respond, the tactical display began showing red warning indicators across the entire fleet formation. Ship after ship went silent, their icons shifting from green to amber to red, in a cascade that spread through their formation like a virus. "This is impossible," the communications officer whispered. "We're losing contact with the entire fleet simultaneously." On the bridge of the flagship Eternal Dominance, General Krax watched in growing horror as his tactical display emptied. 10,000 warships, the pride of the Vorthok military, simply vanished from his screens one by one. "Status report," he roared. His aide, a young officer named Sketh, was frantically working his console. "Sir, we're detecting some kind of interference pattern. It's unlike anything in our databases. Signal appears to be disrupting our ship's command systems, but we can't track the source." "Impossible. Our ships are hardened against all known electronic warfare techniques." "Yes, sir, but this isn't any known technique. It's like our systems are being turned against themselves from the inside." What they couldn't see was the swarm of tiny devices, no larger than insects, that had been deployed months earlier by human maintenance workers during routine supply deliveries. Each device had attached itself to critical ship systems and waited patiently for activation. Now, responding to coded signals from ships that didn't appear on any sensors, the devices were systematically shutting down Vorthok vessels without causing permanent damage. The crews found themselves in ships that simply wouldn't respond to commands. Their weapons offline, their engines dead. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out with clockwork precision. The mighty Chithri war swarms, insects the size of battleships that moved in coordinated formations of thousands, suddenly found themselves falling from the sky. Captain Kim Juan, who had spent 15 years as a xenobiologist studying Chithri hive behavior, watched from his hidden observation post as the creatures landed safely but completely unconscious. "Beautiful work, Dr. Park," he spoke into his communicator to the human scientist who had developed the pheromone weapon. "The sleep compound worked perfectly. They'll wake up in about 6 hours with nothing worse than headaches." The Nefarian Collective, beings of pure energy who traveled in massive cloud formations, discovered that their quantum matrices were being disrupted by harmonic frequencies broadcast from seemingly empty space. What they didn't know was that Professor Naman Su had spent 20 years studying their energy patterns while posing as a theoretical physicist researching clean energy applications. "The frequency modulation is working perfectly," Name reported from his hidden laboratory. "Their energy forms are destabilizing but not dissipating. They'll reform once we stop the broadcast." On the bridge of the stealth destroyer, Soul's Vengeance, Captain Song Haewon monitored the operation with the satisfaction of a master craftsman watching her greatest work unfold. The ship had spent 47 years disguised as an agricultural transport, complete with fake cargo holds full of grain and farming equipment. Now, with its true form revealed, the vessel moved through space like a ghost, its hull-absorbed sensor. Sweeps instead of reflecting them, while its weapon systems could punch through alien shields that had been designed to stop conventional attacks. "Captain," her tactical officer LT Commander on Sujin reported, "we have visual on the Vorthok command ship. Their weapons are offline, engines dead. They're completely helpless." Song nodded grimly. around her officers who had spent decades pretending to be simple farmers, worked their stations, with military precision that would have impressed the galaxy's finest naval academies. Each had been carefully selected and trained for this moment. "Target their engine core with the neural disruptor," she ordered. "I want that crew unconscious but unharmed. We need prisoners for the war crimes trials." "Aye, Captain." Firing neural disruptor. The invisible beam struck the Vorthok flagship, passing harmlessly through its armor, but affecting every organic brain aboard. Within seconds, the entire crew was in deep, peaceful sleep. Communications Officer Bei Donghain looked up from his station with amazement in his voice. "Ma'am, we're receiving surrender transmissions from 47 star systems. The Ethereal Collective is requesting immediate ceasefire negotiations. The Aquatic Alliance wants to discuss terms." Song allowed herself a cold smile. "Tell them. We'll consider negotiations after General Krax stands trial for war crimes." Meanwhile, on Vorthok Prime, the homeworld of the Reptilian Empire, Agricultural Advisor Lim Jae-soon stood in the Planetary Defense Control Center, surrounded by unconscious alien technicians. For 20 years, he had advised them on crop rotation and soil management while secretly mapping every critical system on their world. "Control, this is Harvest Moon," he spoke into a communicator that had been hidden inside what appeared to be a simple farmer's toolkit. "The homeworld is secured. All orbital defense platforms are under our control." The response came immediately. From Ambassador Lee himself, his voice transmitted from what the galaxy had believed was a simple embassy ship. In reality, the vessel was a command dreadnought that could coordinate military operations across multiple star systems. "Excellent work, Colonel Lim. Begin Phase 3. All across Vorthok Prime, humans who had spent decades in agricultural roles began emerging from their cover identities. Supply Coordinator Joe Minky revealed the hidden weapons cache beneath the grain storage facility. Irrigation Specialist Yang Hajin activated the communication jammers she had built into the planet's water treatment systems. Each human had spent years, sometimes decades, preparing for this moment. They had studied every building, every security system, every escape route their alien employers used. Now they moved with the coordinated precision of a military operation that had been planned for half a century. The Vorthok leadership found themselves trapped in their own capital city, surrounded by the very humans they had dismissed as harmless servants. Government buildings were secured without a shot being fired. Military bases found their weapons systems mysteriously offline. Communication networks carried only one message: surrender or face the consequences. In the Galactic Council chambers, Chairman Vexstar received report after report of impossible human victories. His 4 mechanical arms trembled as the scope of humanity's deception became clear. "Get me Ambassador Lee immediately," he commanded. Lee's image appeared on the main screen, but he was no longer wearing diplomatic robes. Instead, he wore a dark, military uniform that no alien species had ever seen before. Behind him, the bridge of his ship hummed with activity as human officers coordinated what could only be described as the most successful surprise attack in galactic history. Chairman Lee said calmly, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "We're still waiting for General Krax to surrender himself for trial." Vexstar's artificial voice cracked with electronic distress. "This is impossible. How did you hide such capabilities?" "Such a fleet? Our intelligence services," reported humans. "As technologically primitive?" Lee's smile was patient but terrifying. "Did you really think a species capable of interstellar travel couldn't build warships? We've been here 50 years, Chairman. 50 years of watching, learning, and preparing." The transmission shifted to show footage from across the galaxy. Corrupt council members watched in horror as their private communications were broadcast on public networks. Crime syndicates discovered their secret operations exposed to law enforcement. Military installations fell to forces that struck like ghosts and vanished just as quickly. "You made a fundamental error," Lee continued. "You confused patience with weakness. You thought politeness meant powerlessness. For 50 years we told you the same thing over and over again." He paused, letting his words echo through the silent chamber. "Never make us angry." The galaxy was learning, but the lesson had come far too late. The mighty dreadnought Bone Crusher drifted helplessly through space like a dead whale, its massive engines silent and weapon ports dark. Inside the bridge that had once commanded fear across 1,000 worlds, General Krax found himself on his knees with a human weapon pointed at his skull. Captain Han Thejin stood over him, her face calm, but her eyes burning with controlled fury. For 3 years, she had served on his ship as a communications technician, bringing him daily reports and maintenance schedules with the perfect subservience he expected from inferior species. "This cannot be happening," Krax wheezed, his yellow eyes darting around the bridge where his crew lay unconscious. "You were nothing, a servant who brought me my morning briefings." Han's grip on her sidearm never wavered. "I hold the Stellar Cross for valor, General. I commanded the defense of Rigel Station against a Vorthok assault fleet twice the size of yours. But you needed to believe I was nothing, so that's what I became." Around them, other members of Krax's support staff were removing their disguises. Chef Park Soo-young, who had prepared the general's meals for 2 years and won praise for her primitive but adequate cooking, now revealed the demolitions. Expertise she had gained during the Titan Wars. Every meal she had served had been an opportunity to map the ship's internal structure. "The soup you enjoyed so much last week," Park said pleasantly. "I was testing how quickly an aerosol compound could spread through your ventilation system. Tonight's dinner included a mild sedative that made your crew more susceptible to the sleep gas." Janitor Ominsu, who had cleaned these corridors for 18 months while enduring constant insults about human cleanliness standards, stepped forward with a device that looked nothing like cleaning equipment. As the ship's cybernetic specialist, he had spent every cleaning shift systematically compromising the Bone Crusher's AI systems. "Every time you complained about the floors not being clean enough," Hill said quietly, "I was installing microtransmitters in your computer cores. Your ship has been under our control for 6 months. We just waited for the right moment to use it." Across the galaxy, similar revelations were unfolding with the precision of a perfectly orchestrated symphony of revenge. On Chithari Prime, the insectoid hive queen Zaressa received an unexpected visit in her inner sanctum. Dr. Quan Sohyun, who had served as her xenobiology consultant for a decade, entered the sacred chamber carrying a small spray device. "Dr. Quan," the queen buzzed. In her musical voice, "Surely you cannot be part of this human madness. You have studied our reproductive cycles with such dedication. You understand our peaceful nature." Quan's smile was gentle but terrifying. "Your Majesty, I have indeed spent 10 years studying your species. I know exactly how your pheromone systems work. I know that the warrior caste responds to specific chemical triggers. And I know how to produce a compound that will make them as docile as larvae." She activated the device, releasing an invisible mist into the chamber's air circulation system. Within minutes, the sound of thousands of warrior insects dropping from their guard positions echoed through the hive complex. "You will surrender those responsible for war crimes," Quan stated calmly. "Or watch your species forget how to fight for the next decade while the compound works through your system." The queen's compound eyes reflected her horror as she realized the scope of human planning. You're studying us to destroy us." "I was studying you to understand you," Quan replied. "The destruction only became necessary when you chose to murder our children." On the energy plane where the Nefarian collective existed, Agricultural Minister Shin Woo-jin materialized using technology that should have been impossible for primitive humans to possess. For 15 years, he had helped them optimize their energy consumption, learning the intricate quantum mechanics that held their consciousness together. The collective speakers pulsed with confused colors. "Minister Shin, how do you manifest on our plane? Your species lacks quantum coherence." Shin held up a device that hummed with energy patterns matching their own. "I learned from the best teachers in the galaxy. Every efficiency improvement I suggested taught me more about your quantum matrices. Now I can disrupt them." He activated the device, and several collective members suddenly found their energy forms flickering and unstable. "Surrender your war criminals, or discover what happens when beings of pure energy experience what you might call ... static." Even the mighty ethereal collective, ancient beings who had transcended physical form millions of years ago, found themselves facing an impossible threat. Professor Nam and Su materialized in their dimensional space, using equipment that bent reality itself. "Professor," their voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere, "you cannot harm us. We exist beyond physical reality." Nam smiled sadly. "Your Highness, I spent 20 years researching theoretical physics while pretending to study farming applications. I learned that consciousness, even transcendent consciousness, still follows certain quantum rules, and rules can be ... modified. Activated a device that shouldn't have been able to affect beings of pure thought. Suddenly, several ethereal beings experienced something they hadn't felt in eons' pain. Impossible, they whispered. Thought cannot be wounded. Everything can be wounded, Nam replied quietly. The question is whether you want to find out how. Deeply. In the Galactic Council chambers, Chairman Vexstar watched his civilization crumble through reports streaming in from across the galaxy. Every species that had laughed at human weakness now found themselves at the mercy of beings they had dismissed as evolutionary failures. His 4 mechanical arms trembled as he processed the scope of humanity's deception. 50 years of careful planning, 50 years of infiltration, 50 years of learning every weakness, every secret, every fear of every species in the galaxy. What do you want? He pleaded with Ambassador Lee, his artificial voice breaking with electronic distress. Lee's image filled the main screen, but he was no longer the patient diplomat who had endured decades of insults. He wore the uniform of humanity's true military, and behind him, the bridge of his command ship hummed with the activity of officers coordinating justice across 1,000 worlds. Justice, Lee said simply, for 2.3 million innocent people who died because you thought we were weak. His words were broadcast simultaneously across every world. Every species, every survivor of humanity's calculated response. In homes and government buildings, in military bases and civilian centers, the galaxy listened to humanity's demands. General Krax will stand trial on the worlds he destroyed before the families of his victims. Every leader who laughed as our colonies burned will face the consequences of their choices. Every species that participated in genocide will answer for their crimes. Lee paused, letting the weight of his words settle across the galaxy like a judgment from the gods themselves. The galaxy will finally learn what we tried to teach you peacefully for 50 years. His dark eyes seemed to look directly at every alien watching the broadcast, carrying a promise that chilled them to their cores. Never make us angry. The age of human patience was over. The age of human justice had begun. 6 months after the galaxy learned to fear human anger, the great crystal dome of the Galactic Council had been rebuilt from the ground up. The new chamber was smaller, more modest, with simple curved walls instead of the towering spires that had once proclaimed alien superiority. Earth's blue and white banner hung at the center of the room, flanked by the flags of species that had earned their place through cooperation rather than conquest. The most dramatic change was in the seating arrangement, where once the Vorthok military had commanded an entire wing. Now only a small section remained for their surviving representatives. The Chithari hung from smaller perches, their compound eyes reflecting humility instead of arrogance. Many seats sat completely empty, their former occupants serving sentences in rehabilitation centers across the galaxy. On the devastated world that had once been New Busan, a very different kind of ceremony was taking place. The tribunal of New Busan had been constructed from the melted remains of Vorthok warships. Its simple courtroom overlooking the memorial gardens that now covered the blast sites where 800,000 humans had died. General Krax stood in energy shackles before the tribunal, his once proud reptilian form now hunched with the weight of realization. Around him sat the survivors' children who had lost parents, grandparents who had lost entire families, spouses who would never again see their loved ones. Judge Ru Hyunjin had lost his wife, 2 children, and 4 grandchildren in the bombardment. Now he looked down at the creature responsible with eyes that held no hatred, only the cold weight of justice. General Krax, he read from the judgment document. You have been found guilty of genocide, war crimes against civilian populations, and crimes against sentience. The sentence is life imprisonment. To be served in the memorial gardens, you will help build with your own hands on the worlds you destroyed. Crax's voice cracked as he spoke, barely audible above the gentle wind that now carried the scent of flowers instead of smoke. I didn't understand. Your species seemed so weak, so helpless. Prosecutor Kim Min-young stood from her chair, her voice carrying across the silent courtroom. She had lost her brother's family in the New Seoul bombardment, but her words held. No personal vengeance, only truth. We were never weak, General. We were civilized. There's a difference you're going to spend the rest of your life learning. As Crax was led away to begin his sentence, a tea-rolled Park Ji-woo approached the bench. She had survived the bombing by hiding in her school's basement, but her parents hadn't been so lucky. Judge Rue, she said in the clear voice of a child who had been forced to grow up too quickly, will he really help make the gardens beautiful? The judge knelt down to her level, his weathered face gentle. Yes, little one. He'll plant flowers where the bombs fell. He'll tend the trees that will grow tall over the places where our families rest. And maybe, while he works, he'll finally understand what his anger cost the galaxy. In the rebuilt council chambers, Chairman Lee Hyun-woo addressed the assembled representatives of 87 species. He no longer held the title of ambassador. The galaxy had elected him as the first leader of the new Galactic Federation, an organization built on principles of justice rather than might. The old order believed that strength came from the ability to destroy, Lee said, his voice carrying easily through the chamber's improved acoustics. We offer a different path, one where strength comes from the ability to protect, where power serves to build rather than tear down. The ethereal collective's representative, a shimmering being of pure energy, pulsed with nervous colors. Chairman Lee, what assurance do we have that humanity won't seek further retribution against those who wronged you? Lee smiled the same patient smile that had once terrified alien leaders. But now it carried warmth alongside its warning. The same assurance we offered for 50 years before you forced our hand. The chamber fell into absolute silence, but it was a different kind of silence than before. It wasn't the silence of fear, but of understanding. Admiral Song-hae once sat in her ready room aboard the New Seoul, humanity's new flagship. The vessel was a marvel of engineering, incorporating the best technology from dozens of species, while maintaining the sleek efficiency that had made human ships so deadly during the brief war. Through her viewport, she could see the combined fleet of the Galactic Federation ships from 30 different species flying in formation. Their crews, working together under human leadership, it was a sight that would have been impossible just months earlier. Commander On Soo-jin entered with the daily briefings, her expression showing the satisfaction of someone who no longer had to pretend to be something she wasn't. Admiral, the last Vorthok resistance cells surrendered this morning. The Chithari Queens have formally requested admission to the Federation. And ma'am, she paused with something that might have been amazement, we're receiving applications from 17 different species asking to join the human colonial program. Song nodded thoughtfully. What's the status of the memorial worlds? Construction is ahead of schedule. The survivors from all 3 colonies have volunteered to help with the building. They say working with their hands helps them heal. The viewport Earth hung in space like a blue jewel, no longer hidden behind the pretense of weakness. The homeworld that had spent 50 years in disguise now stood revealed as the center of a new galactic civilization on Earth's surface. The rebuilt city of Seoul. Children played in parks where their parents worked at jobs that were no longer covers for military operations. Farmers were actually farmers now. Teachers taught real lessons instead of gathering intelligence. Engineers built bridges instead of weapons. But in quiet government buildings, other humans maintained the watch. The galaxy had learned its lesson, but humanity would never again be caught unprepared. On New Busan, in the memorial gardens that now covered the former blast sites, former General Crax knelt in the rich soil, his clawed hands gently planting flowers around a marble stone that bore the names of an entire family. His scales were dirty from honest work, his pride replaced by something approaching understanding. 8-year-old survivors came to visit him every day, not to torment him, but to tell him stories about the people he had killed, about grandmother, Min who made the best kimchi in the colony, about Teacher Park, who always made math fun, about baby cousin Lee, who had just learned to walk at first. Krax had tried to defend his actions to explain the military necessity, but the children's stories had worn down his justifications like water wearing down stone. Now he simply listened, learning the names and lives of every person his anger had destroyed. As the sun set over New Busan, painting the memorial gardens, in golden light, Krax carefully watered the flowers he had planted that day. Tomorrow, he would plant more, and the day after that, and the day after that, the rest of his very long life. He had finally learned what humanity had tried to teach the galaxy 50 years too late. Some lessons, once learned, are never forgotten. Galaxy remembered, and it never again made the mistake of thinking patience was weakness. The end.